Hello and welcome to Cryptid Spotlight Giants. This is a video that has been a long time in the making, and it marks the return to a series that is near and dear to my heart, which is Cryptid Spotlight. Today I want to utilize our time together to discover what these beings are, learn a few interesting stories about them, and uncover if there is any possible reality to the tales. When it comes to a topic like this, it should go without saying that I will undoubtedly overlook quite a few examples of giants. This is mainly due to the abundant amount of stories out there about the beings in this category. In no way, shape, or form is this meant to be a complete guide, but I do want to include some interesting sightings. Giants belong to a fascinating realm of the paranormal world. While many are simply depicted as an abnormally large human, there are others within the lore that fit in with other types of creatures as well. Before getting to those sightings, I feel it is important for us to uncover what exactly the term giant indicates. Just so you know, it isn't as cut and dry as you may think. If you look into what it takes to be considered a giant, it is generally agreed upon that anyone who is over 7 feet tall would be considered this. However, overly tall normal people aren't what we consider when talking about this type of being. The term giant actually originates from the word giganti from Greek mythology. As you will soon see, this very word described very different looking types of creatures. While the Greeks did have stories about the typical giant human, the root word actually was commonly utilized to describe a being that looked like a large human with snake-like legs. Through the years, the word giant has been used to describe various versions of creatures, which did include ogres, a version of cyclops, spirits, deities, and yes, even Bigfoot. Although in relation to that last one, there are a few distinctions that differentiate it from the normal Sasquatch, but cryptozoologist Mark Hall has classified them under the term of true giants. We will get into these details later on in the video. What is fascinating about these beings is that just about every culture from around the world has some type of legend about an extremely large humanoid. This can include the Jotun of Norse lore, the Daitya of India, and also found in the text of the Bible, the Nephilim, and to a lesser degree, the Raphaim. Although with that list, most of those examples were viewed as a type of deity. Outside of those, many legends talk about a normal flesh and blood being that is typically hairy, lives in the deep forests, and more often than not has a taste for human flesh. One feature that I find odd is that it appears more often than not that the giants are frequently said to have red hair. There are ones that have different varieties of hair, but the consensus among tales is that it is typically red. The Paiute tribe from Nevada have legends of a race of red-headed giants known as Cetecus. They were said to be so fearsome that it took the tribes combining with others to drive them out of the area. In 1911, remains were found by miners in Lovelock Cave that did have red hair, but the bones indicated a size between 6 and 7 feet tall. Hardly a giant by any means, but still the legend holds. We can't talk about this topic without mentioning one of the most fantastic locations that is filled with giant lore. This would be the Solomon Islands. They are known locally as Mumu and are thought to live in deep caves located in a dense forest. Much like other lore, they have red hair, are known to eat humans, and range from 10 feet to at least 13 feet. From what has been told, apparently these beings are seen fairly frequently, and the locals are used to the sight. A few interesting stories have emerged. It is said that one time the King of Giants actually tried to convince his tribe to not eat humans, and this led to fighting amongst themselves, which is said to have greatly decreased their population. It was during this time that these beings were known to mate with humans if given the chance. In one story, a woman named Mango was kidnapped from her village and lived as a mate for the giants for 25 years. Due to being missing for so long, many assumed that she was dead. This was until they found her quite alive and pregnant. Since she had been away from civilization for so long, she had become wild and was said to be frothing at the mouth. With great difficulty, the people managed to capture her and bring her back to the village. It was said that she had changed so much that she remained mentally unstable for the rest of her life. She eventually gave birth to a rather large child, which was described as being half caste, or multiracial. Sadly, at 5 years of age, Mango's brother killed the boy, and it was later buried in a secret location. According to the story, this type of thing wasn't that uncommon, and a lot of women were taken by the Giants. Another fantastic tale from the island states that in 1998, a company moved in to start mining gold in the area. It was during this process that the blade of their bulldozer broke, and since they weren't able to fix it that day, the workers went home. Upon returning the next morning, they found the blade was missing, and the site had many extremely large footprints left in the dirt. The blade, which weighed 10 tons, was later found on a hill 100 meters away. From investigating the prints left behind, it was determined that the blade wasn't carried away, but had been thrown from its original location. From what I read, no one has debunked this tale. Scotland has a fascinating legend dating back to the 13th century to present day, about a giant known as Untitled Chapter, or the Big Grey Man. This being is said to stand 8 feet tall, is covered in short gray hair, and can turn invisible, or it can hide really well in the fog. It is known to make its home on the Ben Mountain, but it has been reported in the Rothy Marcus forest. Most accounts state that he actually isn't seen by most people, but is rather heard or felt. Frequently, people who venture to the mountains describe hearing loud footsteps behind them, hearing high-pitched whistling sounds, or feeling extremely oppressive negative energy, which can lead to dangerous thoughts or even madness. A climber named Professor J. Normal Colley was on the mountain in 1924 and reported hearing footsteps behind him. For every 3 steps he made, he heard a singular crunching noise. As he quickened his pace, the footsteps kept getting closer to him until he finally decided to run away. 3 men walking in the previously mentioned forest saw a huge human-like creature standing amongst the trees. Outside of being incredibly tall, everything seemed normal except for its strange face. The men ran back to their car and the creature followed them. As they drove away, the being continued to try to get into their vehicle, all the while easily keeping pace with them at 45 miles an hour. Eventually, it stopped chasing them. As mentioned early on in this video, there are versions of this being that fall into what would be considered simply a version of Sasquatch. Named true giants, they look very similar to Bigfoot, but with a few minor, distinct changes. While most creatures of this kind are said to range between 7 to 10 feet tall, true giants are said to be between 10 and 20 feet tall, with some claiming to be 50 feet in height. Although, I will state for the record that I highly doubt there is an actual 50-foot tall Bigfoot walking around. Talk about making it really hard to stay hidden. Outside of being tall, true giants do have a distinct trait of only having 4 toes on each foot. Again, not to call this into question, and I'm not an expert in physiology, but I would assume having more toes, not less, would be advantageous for the stability of a being that is so tall. However, there are reports from the Iroquois lore that, while on first glance do appear to be a Sasquatch, also fit in with the lore of giants. These beings were known as Genosqua, or stone giants. They were viewed as a tribe of 11-foot tall hairy beings that lived in the forests and frequently attacked the camps of Native Americans. These beings were highly aggressive, produced a smell that resembled rotting flesh, and would predominantly eat human beings. A lot of people try to lump them in with Sasquatch, but they were actually viewed as a tribe much like any other. They had camps set up, utilized war parties, and even would smear mud in their hair to provide almost an armor against the arrows the Native American tribes used. When they caught their prey, they wouldn't tear them apart like an animal, but would rather use their immense strength to twist the head off the body. As stated, many lump them in with Bigfoot, but their abnormally aggressive behavior for that species has always been a little bit confounding. Maybe the answer to this question is that they weren't actually a Sasquatch at all. For posterity, I would like to mention that in Ghana, there are tales about a creature known as the Tenno giant. There isn't a lot of description about its exact height, other than it is known to possess an extraordinary stature. It is said to have white skin that is covered in fine black hair. While it is known to capture and eat women and children, most descriptions really place it more into the range of a Sasquatch or simply a large primate. Although I did find it curious that many stories claim that it will utilize animal furs to keep itself warm when it gets cold out. Obviously, Sasquatch are known to be very smart individuals, but I can't recall hearing any sightings where they were seen wearing clothing of any sort. So maybe the Tenno giant is rightfully in this video. Also, Hawaii has legends about a giant called Haupu, who lived in the mountains of the same name. He operated as a type of lookout and would defend the island. If he sensed danger, he would toss a massive boulder at ships. It is said that some of these rocks can still be found off of Kaena Point. Now, with all this information being said, I am sure that many of you are curious if there is any evidence out there that actually backs the claims of giants being real. Here's where things get really interesting and, dare I say, weird. On October 21st, 1924, an article in the Evening Herald from Klamath Falls, Oregon, posted a full-page article describing some massive bones that were uncovered. According to the writing, 12 full skeletons were unearthed by a construction crew using a road scraper. Along with this were many relics such as pottery, arrowheads, spears, and other tools believed to belong to the Klamath tribe. What was weird was that the skulls of these remains were said to be enormous in size. In fact, the jawbone of one of the bodies was so large that it completely fit over the jaw of one of the workers, who stood 6'4". Due to the skull showing signs of being pierced by arrows, it is believed a battle over territory took place in that location. Now, I know we have to be careful when dealing with old articles from newspapers. Actually, even in today's rags, since a lot of stories were printed just to sell papers. Yet, this paper appears to be fairly accurate, since immediately under this article, there is another one debunking a possible UFO sighting, which they simply call plain. Not only this, but this giant article isn't even the main headline. So, while it is still possible that it could be made up, it doesn't seem like it is. I should have been showing you the article during this whole story, so you can see what I mean. On February 11th, 1902, the New York Times published an article deep within their pages about giant remains being found in Guadalupe, New Mexico. Apparently, 2 graves were found on the ranch of Luciana Quintana that had stone markers with odd symbols on them. When excavated, they found human remains that were said to be well preserved, but were incredibly large. Once measured, they were said to be at least 12 feet tall, had a chest cavity that was 7 feet in circumference. Their massive skulls had teeth the size of hickory and walnuts, and the forearm was 4 feet long. Interestingly, the article states that early Spanish explorers did make note of a race of giants living in the area, and even Native American lore and drawings indicate the same information. It is mentioned that archaeologists were on hand to handle the excavation, but nothing is noted on what was being planned for the specimens. West Virginia is known to have quite a few places where giant bones have been unearthed. Oddly enough, a lot of these skeletons have been found in the various burial mounds in the area. Although in 1857, a body was found in East Wheeling while workers were tilling the soil of a vineyard owned by Sheriff Wickham. Once measured, the individual was said to be almost 11 feet tall, and its teeth were described as being larger than those of a horse. Now, with this story, it is said that the remains were transported to the sheriff's office. There are a lot of similar stories in the area, but before I leave this topic, I would like to mention something that we have heard before. In 1875, an 8-foot-tall skeleton was uncovered near Pawpaw's Creek Bridge that had strands of red hair still remaining on the head. There we are with another red-headed giant story. There have been plenty of other giant remains from all over the globe, but I'd like to focus on the mysterious ones found in a cemetery in Castelnaudary, France. The remains were uncovered by an anthropologist named Georges Vacha de la Puge in 1890. While Georges wasn't a great person, this discovery is fascinating. The bones were said to be from the Neolithic period, and indicated that they belonged to an individual that would have stood 11 foot 6 inches tall. Unlike most stories of this kind, the remains were sent off to be studied at the University of Montpellier. 3 professors in zoology, anatomy, and paleontology examined the bones and confirmed that they were human and appeared to be from a race of extremely large people. They were examined again in 1892, and the same result was concluded. Then, in 1884, more remains were uncovered just 5 miles from where the original ones were found. This time, workers were busy excavating a water reservoir when they came across 3 giant-sized skulls. They were said to be 28, 31, and 32 inches in circumference, and with them was found the rest of the skeletons. When measured, they were said to be between 10 and 15 feet tall. Much like the previous discovery, these bones were sent off to be studied, but this time they went to the Paris Academy. It is unknown what became of these bones since that time. When I say that there are a lot of reports of these beings existing, there are over 1,500 newspaper articles about remains being found in the United States alone. The Smithsonian Institution has mentioned 17 accounts of giant remains in their scientific annual reports, which is a real oddity for them. Not to mention that there are many legends, paintings, and remains in just about every country around the globe. Many people try to debunk their existence by saying it isn't possible for humans to grow that large. Ignoring all the artifacts uncovered, and even the Smithsonian's own reports, it is important to remember that dinosaurs were once a thing. Do animals grow that large today? No, but they did at one point. I don't know how I feel about recent sightings, but if these beings have a viable food source, then I don't see why it couldn't be possible. As I end this, it is worth noting that there are many stories about a race of giants living on Patagonia. Famed explorer Magellan claimed he encountered these people and brought back tales of the immense height being between 12 and 15 feet. Later, other explorers would venture to the area and would claim similar sightings, but each time, in an uncustomary twist, the sizes would actually get shorter and shorter. Finally, reports gave a more accurate depiction of them being around 7 feet tall, which still classifies as giants, but nowhere near the 15-foot mark. It is believed that the people these explorers encountered were the Tehuelche tribe, who are known to be fairly large. Now, many of you requested that I talk about the Kandahar Giant. This includes Storm Rider 770, Wide Awake Viking, and Troublemaker. The story is very sketchy, but since so many requested it, I'll briefly mention the details. In 2002, a group of soldiers vanished while on patrol in the Kandahar Mountains in Afghanistan. After hearing nothing from the men, another group went out to search for them. They found a large cave, and outside of it was military equipment, but no signs of the men. Suddenly, a 10 to 15 foot tall giant burst out of the cave and impaled one of the soldiers with a spear. The men opened fire and kept shooting for 30 seconds. Once the smoke cleared, the giant lay dead. It was said to have red hair, it had 6 digits on its hands and feet, it was wearing moccasins, smelled like rotting flesh, and it had 2 sets of teeth. The group called for rescue, and soon a helicopter arrived and took the men and body back to base. The body was never seen again, and the men were required to sign a non-disclosure agreement. It is said the whole event was covered up, and people investigating the story even contacted the military, who said that they had no knowledge of any such event. Normally, this wouldn't be proof of anything for me, especially with the government claiming UFOs didn't exist, and now they suddenly know all about them. However, many tie this story to a filmmaker and author known as L.A. Marzulli, which many question his authenticity. I don't know anything about him, so I can't talk for or against him, so I'll leave that up to you. Finally, I want to mention that even though it is seen purely as legend, I did find it interesting that in London, 2 giants named Gog and Magog were captured by the founder of Britain named Brutus. In this legend, he actually kept them chained outside his palace in Guildhall as a form of protection. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this topic. I didn't get to talk about every story there is, but I feel the information provided gives a pretty clear picture of the broad reach of these tales. This video took me a long time to put together, and I hope it brought some clarity to the topic. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.